Hello, hello, amazing artists. It's Kelli Folsom here, and I want to welcome you back to another Art Life Conversations podcast. I am super excited to be here with you today because I'm going to be talking with you about a book that I feel like really changed my art life and really kept me from a lot of pain and sabotage and discouragement along the way just by reading this book. So this is going to be my recommendation for Art and Fear, the Art and Fear book, which I read in my first year of art school, and sort of a review of it and how I feel like it really saved me from a lot of problems along the way. So happy that I picked up this book in Barnes and Noble, years ago, back in like 2007, whenever I first started art school. So sometimes we see people only at the stage that they're at. We don't really see where they've come from, everything that they've dealt with, all of the difficulties that they've faced. And so I just want all of you to know, like, if you are facing any self-doubt, any fears, just know, like, I have been there, done that, gone through all those things. And this book was definitely a lifesaver for me. And I'll also talk about why it was also a lifesaver for me to not get like sucked into the academic vortex, which is what I call it. So I'll just read you. This is by David Bayles and Ted Orland. It's called Art and Fear, an Artist's Survival Guide. I think probably everybody has this, so maybe this will just be a refresher, but maybe some of you are new to your art life journey and have never heard of this classic book that, you can find a bazillion blog posts about out there. Even James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, has written about one of the things I'm going to talk to you about in this book. It is a classic, and it's such a good read, again and again and again. But I think especially it is for everybody at every stage, but I think especially for those who maybe are just starting out. Okay, so it says this is called an Artist Survival Guide, which I love, by David Bayles and Ted Orland. What is your art really about? Where is it going? What stands in the way of it getting there? These are questions that matter, questions that recur at each stage of artistic development, and they are the source for this volume of wonderfully incisive commentary, it says. This is the main thing I think here. It says, Art and Fear explores the way art gets made, the reason it often doesn't get made. That is a huge piece. And the nature of the difficulties that cause so many artists to give up along the way. And this is definitely a book that I think that saved me from giving up, especially in that first year of art school. And I think every artist who is struggling out there right now and thinking about quitting, thinking about giving up, I highly recommend that you pick this book up and read it. So this is a book about what it feels like to sit in your studio or classroom at your wheel or keyboard, easel or camera, trying to do the work that you need to do. It is about committing your future to your own hands, placing free will above predestination, choice above chance. It is about finding your own work. How freaking powerful is that? That is amazing. So you can probably see why I love this book. And I just wanted to talk about a few different the three main things that really stood out to me whenever I read this book. And for you, it may be some other things, and I've kind of earmarked a couple of things here. But the very first one is the one that James Clear and everybody talks about, which is the example of quantity leads to quality. So in this book, and this was something I was really struggling with in art school, and I was actually like getting kind of criticized and made fun of for me doing a lot of little paintings, whereas everybody else was going for like some grand masterpiece. So whenever I read this book, it was just like, oh my God, I'm doing the right thing. So it was such a relief to me, because so much of the time, we have like this imposter syndrome. Nobody tells us how to be an artist. It's like, I'm not a real artist. And that's another thing that this book really helped me with, was that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt that I had. So Quantity leading to quantity, and sometimes I'll say like go for quantity over quality. So they give a parable or a story in this book. I think that it's accurate, or that it actually really happened. But basically the story goes that in an art school, I think it was a pottery class, they decided that they were going to grade one pottery class based on one perfect pot, right? Throwing one pot that was just like perfect, right? And they were going to receive a grade just based on the perfection or quality, right, of this one pot. And then the other class, let's say group B, I'm not sure if I'm getting this exactly right, but the other class, they told them they were going to be graded on the quantity of pots that they threw. So don't worry so much about the quality of the pots, but you're going to get your grade based on the quantity of pottery that you throw on the wheel, right? So of course, in the end, what ended up happening was the class that threw the most quantity of pots, they actually got really good at their skill set, right? Like they, instead of worrying about perfection and making sure that it was all right and perfect, they just focused on like sitting at the wheel, making pot after pot, or vase after vase, whatever it was. And so in the end, the result was that class had better quality of pots. They had a huge, amount of quantity, but they also had better quality than the class that was just focused on like throwing the perfect pot and getting their grade based on that, right? So, and this is something that I still stand by to this day, especially if you're just beginning on your journey as an artist. There is always, of course, an argument that could be made for, well thought out work or quality, but quantity, creating a consistent habit of creating is so important, right? And then not like attaching too much to any one creation along the way. I know I've really preached about this a lot, but not getting hung up on each painting along the way, each pot along the way, each sculpture along the way, not attaching too much to that one thing, that one creation. It's more about that, series of link in the chain, right? It's those 100 paintings that led to the fact, and maybe 80% of those 100 paintings were not the quality that you wanted, right? But it's those 100 less than perfect, imperfect, maybe low skill, low technical quality, whatever. It is those 100 that leads to the 101 where now you can see, wow, look how much I've grown. Look how much better I've gotten, right? Obviously you show up with the intention of like doing your work and also doing it maybe 1% better that day or getting better, try with the intention of getting better. But I think getting better does come naturally whenever we are learning and creating consistently. So that was really a huge thing for me back then, especially because in the academic world, I'll talk about that, the academic vortex, so much more emphasis was being put on like the concept of the painting or the size of the painting or the narrative of the painting, the idea, and also, on like this grand masterpiece. And then years later too, I remember, going to like a drawing group at this atelier, which was more focused on like, more hyper realism work and having like these long drawn out steps to creating a piece of art. And what I noticed in that studio was months would go by and people would just still have like the same painting on their easel that they had on their easel in the same stage of development 6 months ago. And I would just be so perplexed. I'm like, do you know how many imperfect paintings you could have created in 6 months that would have actually made you into a better artist, a better skilled artist, right? So anyway, so that's the first story that really stood out to me in 2007 when I first read this book. Okay, the next one is talking about imposter syndrome. And I just kind of earmarked a little part here for us. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. So fears about yourself, right? And I love this quote, we have met the enemy and he is us. This is so true. Pogo. So, but this part on pretending, this was something for me that was really something that I had to work through, which was now we kind of call it imposter syndrome, right? So I'll just kind of read what they wrote here in the book, which is pretending. The fear that you're only pretending to do art is the readily predictable consequence of doubting your own artistic credentials. After all, you know better than anyone else the accidental nature of much that appears in your art, not to mention all those elements you know originated with other artists, right? Mentors, teachers, and even some you never even intended, but which the audience has read into your work. Gosh, that happens all the time, right? Like, oh, your work looks like just like so-and-so, like that's not allowed or something, like you're just copying somebody else. Anyways, from there, it's only a short hop to feeling like you're just going through the motions of being an artist. It's easy to imagine that real artists know what they're doing and that they, unlike you, are entitled to feel good about themselves and their art. Fear that you are not a real artist causes you to undervalue your work. Okay, so I'll stop there, get the book, read that section on pretending. It is amazing. But it's so true. Like in so many artists I work with, I know this is something that they're working on, that they've struggled with to overcome. Like, oh, I'm not a real artist. Everybody else is like a real artist, but not me, right? So that one I think was really, really a big one for me, was just like going, no, I am a real artist, you know. And in the beginning too, words and comments that people make can really be like, especially if you have a lot of self-doubt, right? And you have imposter syndrome, it's almost like anything anybody says, if it's not a supportive comment, or if it doesn't feel supportive and it just triggers that self-doubt and that imposter syndrome, like they could just say anything. And people say anything. People say dumb shit all the time, especially on social media, you know. But even like in artistic communities, like I remember being at art school and like people just kind of taking like their little jabs at you and taking their jabs at your artwork and saying things like, I don't see you in your art, or like, oh yeah, your painting still lifes and landscapes. That's a sellout, you know, kind of thing. So, and this is like really real, you know. And then even whenever you feel like you find your way and you get out into the world, into the art world, right? This still goes on. Things like this still get said. Or you get compared to other artists. And maybe like if you've studied with particular artists, like maybe you study with me and then people are like, oh yeah, your work looks like Kelli Folsom, you know. And if you have any ounce of like that self-doubt, imposter syndrome, you know, that's probably going to trigger you. It's probably going to make you feel like, see, I'm not a real artist. I'm just copying so-and-so, you know, that kind of thing. Like they're the real artist. And so if you're getting that being a student with me, for example, just know like I got that as a student. And even not as, there's people that I've been compared to that I've never even studied with. And frankly, I don't even really like their work. I'm not a fan of their work, and I don't study it. And then somebody will say, oh, you look just like, your work looks just like so-and-so. And it's kind of like, well, okay. But you have to understand, like, people are just always looking for connections. And again, also people just, you know, blah, 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 just say all kinds of stuff, you know. So the problem is not them. The problem is not the external world. The problem is really internally with us when those things bother us. Because if we really felt solid in ourselves as an artist, we really valued ourselves as a real artist, if we really chose that identity and really fully stepped into that identity, which, you know, like on my Art Life School site, you'll see like I have like, here is basically success as an artist, and one of the main 3 pillars I say is identity, claiming your identity as an artist, developing your own identity as an artist, developing your artistic voice, right? that is a key pillar to becoming a successful artist in the future. Okay, for me, the other aspect of this book, and it may not apply to you, although I do feel like there could be some application even if you're not in the academic art world, but because I went to an art college and it was, all very academic art world, I was being pushed to go on and get my master's degree and then start teaching, becoming a professor myself, all these kind of things. I was getting advised to do, right, from the faculty members, and even just dealing with the faculty members there, dealing with the academic world of art, was super, super challenging. And reading this book was so enlightening to me around that, so that I could say, look, I'm here to get my degree. I'm here to be in 4 years of monk mode, head down, doing the work, finding out who I am as an artist, and that's it. I'm not here to get approval from them, because once I'm out of here, baby, And so another story statistic really that they shared in here, which scared the shit out of me as a college student who had just invested so much money in art school, was the enormous percentage of art school students who would go to art school just like me, and then whenever they graduate, never do art again, go into an entirely different field, right? Quit on their art and totally do something different. And when I read that in this book, the statistic of that, I was like, whoa. So it really flipped the switch for me that getting this degree is not going to set me up for success as an artist. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of the work. Just developing the skill set, getting the education and degree is just the beginning of the work if I want to live my life as a full-time artist. So anyways, I highly recommend this book, as you can hear and see, and that's just a few of the juicy stories and wisdom that lie within this book. So if you do not have it, or if you're struggling with any of the imposter syndrome, being a perfectionist, or the academic vortex right now, then I highly recommend that you pick this up and give it a super thoughtful read. It will benefit you in so many ways. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. If you liked this podcast, if it was supportive to you, then I ask you to support me back in return. Subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, and last but not least, be sure to check out all of the resources that I have for you below. And if you're interested in working on finding your artistic voice, you can join as an Art Life School member and go through that program course with us.